Hi, Adair here from withadair.com. I want to talk a little bit about the idea of symptoms versus signals. So, we're taught in the world that I grew up in, the world that most of us grew up in, to look at things through a medical model, which is this idea of looking at the problem, diagnosing the problem, and then treating the problem. And there's definitely spaces where that's totally appropriate. But I believe that the medical model has crept way too far into our experience of being alive. It's gone beyond what's helpful in a lot of situations. So I first learned about this concept of symptom versus signal from Thea Monnier. She's a writer who does a lot of, and she's a counselor who does a lot of work around pleasure activism, which if you haven't heard about it, look her up. She's super cool. So I believe it's necessary to examine our perceptions of what's happening in our minds and our bodies and our spirits on a regular basis. And I believe it's actually critically important to be willing to shift this perspective so we can experience more ease and more flow in our lives, and so that we can have more access to joy. So if we're experiencing a lot of symptoms and we're not feeling great all the time, or even if we're not feeling exuberantly ourselves, we don't have to be feeling terrible. You don't have to be feeling terrible. If you're experiencing symptoms, the most typical ones are around anxiety or depression, but you could look at physical symptoms too, gastrointestinal issues, that kind of thing. Are you looking at it as a symptom, as like, I need to go to the doctor and get diagnosed, there's a problem, there's something wrong? Are you looking at it that way? And if you are, my invitation to you is to get a little curious about other ways that you might be able to see the challenges that you may be experiencing. So if you think about what's going on right now in your body, right? Like, how do your joints feel? How's your mobility? How's your digestion? That kind of thing. You could just take a moment and consider, like, how does my body feel? And then if you think about your energy levels, high, low, wish you had more, feeling like you got plenty, feeling like kind of wired and tired, like you have a lot of energy, but you know that there's a lot of exhaustion underneath that. I've definitely been there myself. And then like the quality of your mind. Is it scattered? Is it focused? Does it rest in a neutral place? Is it open and expansive, or does it tend to kind of spiral down? So anything that you came up with here, anything at all, we could see it as a symptom, certainly, if it's something that you don't want to keep going. You could see it as a signal, too, if you're like, yeah, my energy's good, or, you know what, my mind's been really steady lately, or my mood's been, consistent. It hasn't been all over the place. That's a signal that something's in balance. And if you came up with more of the negative stuff, a lot of worry or a lot of abusive language towards yourself, or even a lot of issues in how you're relating to others or how you're feeling about others inside, you could see those as symptoms, like, oh, there's something wrong with me. Or you could see them as signals that something is not in balance in your way of conceiving of the world, or in how you're living in terms of the habits that you have, or in terms of the environment that you're in. Something's not quite right. So there's a really big difference between those two, because this idea of symptom kind of leads us to thinking there's something wrong, first of all. And then if we follow a traditional path, we go to a doctor or a therapist or something to help us because they know how to fix us. They know how to help us get fixed. A lot of great doctors and therapists out there. I'm not knocking them. I'm knocking the general concept that most of us internalized. So it's easy for us to become accustomed to things, right? It's easy for us to get really used to certain uncomfortable stuff. And that's a situation where a symptom might kind of be sublimated. Like, yeah, I have that issue with my knee, or I have that issue with my teeth, but I'm not going to like go get it checked out because I have these reasons. So we just kind of like push it under the rug. And so that's kind of like seeing it as a symptom, but not wanting to deal with it. And then it's also easy to like get really easy to complain about things too, like, oh, this issue, and kind of become a broken record about complaining about it to ourselves or to others, and yet not really take action around it. Or we take action and the action that we're taking doesn't work. Like, if you're seeing a therapist for 5 years for your anxiety and it's not getting a lot better, like, it might be worth asking, is that the answer? Because if we're not seeing substantive change, then we're seeing something as a symptom, and we're not seeing it as a signal that something else needs to change. So when we start to look for signals, we find them. It might be an indicator that things are going really well. You know, if you have a lot of like really good energy, or you're feeling really productive, or whatever, you're feeling like your relationships are really good, like that's a great signal. And if you've got a lot of anxious feelings, a lot of anxious thoughts, or a lot of depressive stuff that keeps coming up over and over again, what if that was a signal that something needed to change? And what if you actually took some time to dive in, and whether it was with the help of someone who could help you by asking questions or holding space, or just alone in meditation or journaling, like, wow, what is this trying to teach me? There's that great quote or phrase, this idea of like, your life will change a lot when you start to see that the things that are happening to you are actually trying to teach you something. Or instead of saying, why is this happening to me? You can say, what's this trying to teach me? And that follows this idea of, right, it's a signal. There's something underneath this that I'm being asked to look at. One of the things that's been a pet peeve of mine lately is this idea that I have my anxiety. A couple people have asked me recently, because I've dealt with anxiety and depression, or states of anxiety and depression, a lot over time, less and less over time, but I recently had an experience that was really rough. And a couple of people asked me, like, how's your anxiety? And I was like, don't ask me that. And of course I wasn't like a total jerk to them, but don't ask me about my anxiety, because I don't have anxiety. I experience states of anxiousness. Again, we come back to this idea of symptom versus signal. If I have anxiety, I'm like drawing that into me and making it a part of me if I use that language. And language is a choice, and it's one of the coolest, easiest, and most free ways of shifting what our life looks like. So if I'm talking about my anxiety, I'm de facto making that a part of me. And like, no, thank you. Not something that I want to identify with, even if it's been there for years and years and years. No. Instead, I can say, yeah, I experienced a couple weeks where I was having a lot of anxious feelings in my chest. And I may or may not be clear on what that was trying to teach me or what needed to change. But at least I was seeing it as a signal of like, okay, just pay attention. This is going to move and do X or Y. And very likely, you know, if I stick with what I need to stick with in order to stay balanced, in order to stay healthy, if I maintain relationships and reaching out with the people I need to talk to, and I do my meditation and my yoga, it's likely to change. And lo and behold, that depressive state and anxious state, it did shift. And thank goodness I didn't go down that road of, oh, my depression is back and it could be here forever and it's mine and it always comes back for me. And you can see that negative spiral, how that could really easily take place, and what a different approach to say, yeah, I'm having this experience and I think it is trying to teach me something. And it was, for sure, not pleasant, but it didn't last. So we can start with language. Like, how do you want to see what's happening to you? What's happening for you? And I don't take it lightly. Like, I don't take anybody's experience of mental imbalance or what we call mental illness lightly at all. It's really tough. And I've been there even recently, like I mentioned, like in some really rough places. So I'm not making light of it. It's not an easy place. But we might get to a point where instead of tolerating something, or instead of complaining about it, you might want to look at the language you're using. And you might want to start looking for people who use language that seems to go on the upward, expansive spiral instead of the downward. And what you might find is that the people, if you're in a state that you don't like, take a look at the people you're spending time with and get a sense of, are they seeing things as symptoms, or are they seeing them as signals? And have I taken on an identity and a way of looking at things that really doesn't serve me in the long term, because I'm identifying with these people who are like, oh yeah, they're not seeing things in an expansive way. And, it doesn't mean they're wrong or anything. It just might mean that it's time to look for people who are seeing things in a way that jives with you and that lets you get some agency. So making a choice to look for folks who are thinking about things in ways that feel different. It can be really hard, and I also believe that it is absolutely necessary, because as we start to shift what we're thinking, it can be kind of tender. And if we spend a lot of time in the same exact environments as we were spending before, it might get washed away. So finding a place where it can rest and where it can actually be nurtured, this new concept. In this case, it might be the idea of something being a signal. Finding a place where that can be nurtured is really critical. And when you start spending time with people who see things with the values that you're interested in, you'll start seeing things differently. Even if you're not convinced on it, even if you're not sold on it, if you're like, I think I like that, but it's weird and it's different. If you just spend time with people and get really curious about how you respond to them, you might find that you shift pretty gradually and pretty naturally into a very different way of identifying. And that's cool, because evolution, as Alyssa Budenak, my buddy and amazing grief doula, says, evolution isn't really optional. Like, we're here and we will evolve, so you better choose how you want to evolve. And it's very empowering. It's a really great way to build agency when we start to make decisions that are informed by this sense of, I'm getting signals. And you'll be amazed at how much more sensitized you get to signals once you start seeing issues, problems as signals. And what that sensitization really is your intuition getting sharpened. And once our intuition starts to get sharp, and once you start to get hits of intuition on a regular basis, your life's going to change. And it is going to start happening for you instead of to you. And I don't know if there's anything more magical than that. So that's what I got. If you like this, if you've got thoughts on it, feel free to hit me up on the contact page on my website, withadair.com, or in the comments. All right. Ciao.